China and Elon Musk have the same problem. They're both really good at making money, but they're both really, really bad at getting people to like them. Except one of them has been doing a lot better than the other lately, because it kind of seems like China has taken over the internet as of late. From iShow speeds, like record-breaking stream numbers, to the incredibly positive reception of like Chinese tech, it seems like China's on a bit of a comeback in terms of reputation. The share of Americans who have a negative view of China has posted its first decline in 5 years. And when we look at younger Americans, the view is significantly more positive. It feels a little bit like this has come out of nowhere, but I want to show you that it's actually pretty far from that, and that there is, almost 100 years of history that could explain how we got to exactly where we are today. So China has had like a big problem for a while now. The view of China domestically has been starkly different to the international view. Broadly speaking, whereas Chinese citizens view their own country as the foremost global superpower and as the most important country in the world, outside of China, people maybe have different views. The word China has basically been synonymous with the CCP. The politics and the government are the country, and the country is the politics. They become intertwined to a level that's not seen necessarily in a country like the US, where international favorability can swing quite dramatically depending on who's in charge. This has a bit of a knock-on effect though. When a country is so strongly associated with its government, then it naturally pushes people to focus on the controversies of the government. There's not a shortage of those in China. For example, like if we think of South Korea, I bet you there are more Americans that could name every member of BTS than could name the South Korean president, even though he tried to enact martial law last year and literally do like an unsanctioned military takeover of the country. There are definitely still more Americans who care about BTS and think about them as the representation of what South Korea is about. This ability to like decouple the views of the government from the views of the country can give a country like a tremendous amount of soft power. You might have heard the term before, but soft power is basically the ability to influence another country without using military or economic pressure. It's a way of using your cultural influence and social influence to generate a positive view of your country abroad. The US is like the king of soft power, or at least it has been. When people think of the US, maybe not so much right now, but at least in the past, they thought of Hollywood, they thought of Times Square, hot dogs, or even the many like musical icons that the US has produced. China infamously has had a pretty bad soft power deficit. The only form of soft power China really has had for the longest time is that one weird font that you see outside Chinese restaurants, but was actually just invented in Cleveland, Ohio by like some American guys. In fact, if you've seen China mentioned in the media lately, it's likely been in reference to national security. And while you and I can't really do much about matters of national security, it's worth remembering that we can do a lot about personal security, especially online. Just in the last year, over $1 trillion was lost to scams worldwide. It's no small issue, and if you're anything like me, you've likely been inundated with scam texts and calls lately. Something that just like reminds me how much of our private information is online all of the time. Today, scammers can actually just bulk buy your info online from data brokers, which are companies that specialize in selling private data. They're legally required to remove your info if you ask, but they deliberately make it confusing and difficult to turn a quick profit. There is a solution that can help protect you from this issue. It's Aura, who've kindly sponsored this video. They've created this really neat all-in-one online security platform that can scan and delete your info from these brokers' databases and can protect you from issues like identity theft and fraud. If the worst does happen, they include $5 million of identity theft insurance protection, as well as 24/7 customer service for extra peace of mind. Staying safe online normally requires quite a lot of work and technical knowledge, but Aura comes with features like live security alerts and tools like a built-in VPN and password manager, so you don't really have to sacrifice convenience for safety. If you would like to know if you've already been a victim of a data breach, as well as getting a free credit report in the process, then you can join Aura for free for 14 days by using my link, aura.com/fads. Thank you to Aura for sponsoring this video. Let's get back to it. This soft power deficit has been a big deal though, because it's made it really hard for a positive view of China to actually break through into the mainstream. And since the founding of the People's Republic of China, the Chinese have kind of been aware that they really needed to spread their message abroad. In the mid-50s, Chairman Mao told the Chinese state broadcaster to act promptly and take control of the earth, by which he meant they should go out and publish a pro-China message. It was for it to act as a direct mouthpiece of the party. And People in America didn't really want to hear from the CCP in that way. This strategy was infamously quite unsuccessful. That is until the late 90s, when one guy decided to try something a little bit different. This guy here is Jiang Zemin, and he is the third leader of China. In the late 90s, after China-US relationships had begun to warm, he launched a policy, a pretty crucial policy called Going Global. Going Global was a business strategy, effectively, designed to encourage Chinese businesses to actively go out and invest overseas, to plant themselves inside foreign companies, to take stakes inside foreign companies, and spread the message of China, in quotes, abroad. It wasn't necessarily a political strategy so much as it was a business one, an attempt to do what his predecessors had failed to do, which was to integrate themselves more with foreign economies. Jiang Zemin was really big on the idea of soft power. One of the things he's most famous for is his deep love of the movie Titanic. So China's then president Jiang Zemin was such a fan that he urged fellow Communist Party leaders to see it. I invite my comrades of the Politburo to see the movie, not to propagate capitalism, but to better understand our opposition, to better enable us to succeed, he said. Let's not assume that we can't learn from capitalism. I think bro low-key just liked the movie. But he was such a big fan of the US's ability to exercise soft power through Hollywood, which is something that he wanted to recreate in China. This desire to create meaningful soft power was like a major part of China's going global policy, and it transitioned from a business strategy into also a media strategy. In 2009, the central government decided to boost the media globalization effort by announcing $6 billion for their various news agencies to go abroad and to do local reporting and to promote the idea of China abroad, alongside boosting up their domestic film industry. I want to give you another quote from the CCP's then propaganda chief, when the $6 billion was committed. He said, "We must go global, strengthening our foreign language channels, expanding our partnership with foreign television organizations, vigorously pushing for the international transmission of our TV programs, so that our images and voices can reach thousands of homes in all parts of the world." Pretty clear that he understood what needed to be done. And this attempt to make their state media agencies popular has been way more successful than you might have realized. It's implanted across the world, and it has a really big presence, especially in Latin America and in Africa. In some way, the Chinese strategy to try and promote themselves with the news kind of worked. They are everywhere. But in a more important way, it totally failed, because as China had pumped millions into promoting media, the vibe kind of shifted and technology began to take a much bigger role in how people consume their daily information. Just over half of US adults say that they at least sometimes get news from social media. As social media began to rise as people's primary information source, the distrust of the mainstream media in tandem began to make people more suspicious. At this point, the Chinese leadership did recognize a pretty crucial insight, which is that you can't effectively promote a nation just by trying to promote ideology. You need to promote something that actually excites and appeals to global audiences. And this is where Made in China 2025 comes in. It is an industrial policy that was launched in 2015 to effectively take China from a country that made toys and trinkets to one that would be a leader in advanced manufacturing. The whole policy was focused around 10 key areas, including things like renewables, electric vehicles, and advanced mobiles and computing technology. China for a long time has not been the low-cost manufacturing hub that people often think it is, and it is significantly more expensive to build things in China than, say, Malaysia, India, Thailand, or Vietnam. To fund China, they couldn't necessarily just rely on making toys. They had to make things that were more valuable and that they could sell for more money. And if we fast forward 10 years from 2015 when this policy was launched, it kind of seems like they smashed it, to be honest. One analysis found that over 86% of those goals that were set out have been met. The best example of the success of this program probably comes from electric vehicles. In the space of a decade, they've gone from less than 1% of new cars in China being electric vehicles to electric vehicles making up the majority of new cars sold. It's a little bit crazy. In solar power, they've replicated the same thing. China on its own has created almost twice as much solar power capacity as the rest of the world combined in 2024. It's a bit insane. They achieved this through a combo of massive investment from the government into these industries, but also through some quite clever policies to just incentivize certain behaviors. Many Chinese cities have free and preferential parking for EVs, and they've electrified entire buses and taxi fleets in some cities too, all to encourage the growth of this industry. This Made in China 2025 policy was so successful that in the first Trump administration, they specifically referenced it as a reason for wanting to impose tariffs on China. However, building just good tech isn't really enough to get people to care and to get people to think that your country is cool, in quotes. Part of the story that sometimes gets missed is that this relative isolation happened both ways, because as you restrict the flow of trade, you restrict the flow of information. And so much as the Chinese weren't aware of necessarily what was happening in American markets, because they weren't allowed to trade in them, the Americans weren't aware of what was happening in China to a great detail. And this lack of communication has made the developments coming out of China seem like a quantum leap, something that's happened overnight, rather than something that's been like decades in the making. It's only more recently started to actually break into the mainstream of online culture, at least in the US. And to see why, I'm going to explain one more little bit of Chinese policy. Borrowing a boat to go out to sea. And this is a quote that comes up quite often. It basically refers to the idea of not reinventing the wheel. Initially, this was like a business strategy, right? Borrowing a boat to go out to sea meant investing in foreign companies. But it's taken on like a new form of meaning, referring to the idea of using content creators effectively as a vehicle to promote Chinese products. The biggest influencers have more impact on the mainstream culture than like legacy media ever could. And by giving these people a chance to see independently the fruits of successful industrial policy by China, they've been massively able to promote a vision of China that doesn't necessarily focus on the CCP, which is hugely controversial, and instead focuses on something that's much less controversial, but much more entertaining to the general public. And ultimately, it's because the technology does deliver on a lot of what it promises. The specs are pretty insane, and it's genuinely something that people can relate to, even outside of China. As I said, it helps to break this association that people have of China as being just another word for the CCP. Instead, China becomes more about its culture and what the lives of either people on the ground are like, or what the products of industrial policy have created. It's a lot more authentic, and it's relied on what would be considered credible voices, or voices that are considered relatively independent. And I will say that, given all of this, it's worth mentioning that they've been handed a few free wins lately. The increasing isolationism of the US, especially in the last few months, has created all of this open space that can be taken up by whoever wants to, which in this case so often seems to be China. And the place where this is the most apparent is the poorer countries of the world, because China has been ingratiating itself in places like Africa mainly, where they've been investing massive amounts into building infrastructure projects, into building roads and trains and things like that. All the while, the US has taken the complete opposite stance on foreign aid and has been deciding to withdraw itself from all of these countries. If you think in an isolationist view, like the US is thinking about it, it's to focus their resources on developing America. But if you think in a more international view, all this does is leave space for another actor to step in and to even act as almost a savior, which is part of the reason why Chinese media is so much more popular in Africa and Latin America than anywhere else. China is increasingly becoming the best option around, not just for countries in Africa, but also with the EU, which has been normalizing relationships in the midst of all the trade war that's been going on. They've been given a lot of wins lately, kind of for free. But really, if there's a take-home message from all of this, I think the take-home message is that there's nothing that China's really done in these industries that couldn't have been done in any other wealthy country. There's no reason why, my country or your country couldn't commit to long-term strategic planning, to long-term strategic investment, to building up domestic industries, and to actually have a plan to meet people where they already are. It just happens that the priorities in, I guess, the US or the EU have not been this. There have been other aims that have seemed more important to pursue and have left a lot of space for someone else to hop in and do what we've seen.